Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Thursday, the 3rd of February. It's the morning after the night before, after Rangers' shambolic performance in the Old Firm derby at Parkhead, losing 3-0 to Celtic, who reclaim top spot in the table by a solitary point. I'm joined this morning, as ever, by Joshua Barry and Johnny McFarlane alongside me as well. We had a sort of instant reaction to the game last night, Joshua, which you can go and find on our YouTube channel. We'll get Johnny's reaction in a minute, but folks, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember, if you haven't hit that subscribe button already, then please do so. It means you'll never miss a video when we go live. And also that fantastic offer, just a day left, I'm led to believe, just £1 for the entire 6-month period for the Rangers Review. And you also get entered into a prize draw for a signed first team jersey. Just head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe. Okay, Johnny, you watched it like the rest of us. What was your main takeaways from the game?
Well, you can have all the tactics in the world, and at the Rangers Review, we love to get into the detail, and the people that read the website love to get into the detail of what happens with the Rangers. But there's a universal truth when it comes to football. You can have the best tactics in the world, you can have everything organised pre-match, but if you're not prepared to do the basics, if you're not prepared to match your opponent's intensity, if you're not prepared to track runners, if you're not prepared to hold your position, then of course none of that actually really matters. And what we saw from Celtic from the get-go, which we knew was coming, was a team that swarmed Rangers, that got on top of Rangers with an alacrity that was completely missing from the men in light blue. They were obviously up for it. They were obviously set up to go after Rangers from the get-go, and there was no response. There was absolutely no response. And all I can say is when the goal came after 4 minutes, it had been in the post after 4 minutes. I mean, Rangers were all at sea. So I think the first thing you have to say to the players, big games this season, Malmo, hopeless. Hibs in the semi-final, hopeless. This game, hopeless. Okay, Ibrox defeating Celtic in the first game. I thought they bounced back really, really well, given the issues with COVID and the people that were missing. But in the other big games so far, really, really, really poor. And these are the biggest of the big games. People might say, "Oh, Johnny, what about the Europa League?" Yeah, okay, they did okay in the Europa League. They got through in second position. But Celtic Champions League games, which are another level in terms of importance, nowhere near at it.
Well, Joshua, we touched on this last night. Where does the blame lie? Or is it a collective? Is it the manager more so, or the players? Who takes the shoulder of the blame here?
It's a tough one because obviously every manager gets things wrong. Every manager within their bedding in periods will get things wrong. But I agree with Johnny in terms of even if the setup's poor and interestingly, listening to Van Bronckhorst after the game, it seemed as if he didn't want his side to set that deep. But perhaps that was a naivety to expect that Celtic wouldn't come onto them as quickly as they did. But I think Johnny's completely right to say that you still need to do the basics well, and Rangers didn't do that at all. I mean, how many times was there about 3 Celtic players in front of Ryan Kent as he got the ball, or they seemed to work harder, and there also seemed to be a lot more of a confidence in what they were doing. I thought, Ryan Kent took 3 or 4 pop shots from just hopeless areas that almost seemed like the end of a mazy run that you take when you're playing cuppy and you think, well, just take a shot because there's nothing else on. But there was no overlap. There was no. It just seemed as if they were playing together for the first time. And the irony, of course, being the core of that team had not lost an Old Firm game for 2 years. Celtic, 9 of that 11 was signed in the summer. So I think it lies with both. I think Johnny's completely right again to say, look at the League Cup semi-final amongst other games. But also I thought the setup was just terrible because you kind of going man for man with in a four-man midfield that includes Ahmad, Kent, and Aribo. It looked naive. I don't know if Borna Barisic's instruction was to stand off Abada, but it was just crazy. He gave him, he allowed him into the box, and then he allowed him to pick his passes. So all over the pitch, just absolutely terrible. I think both need to shoulder the blame. The setup was poor, but as players, they could absolutely have done better.
Yeah, I'm not so much. I'm not so much interested in games before Giovanni van Bronckhorst arrived. To be honest, I'm interested in games since he arrived. He got that bounce when he came in. Terrific start, of course. Since the winter break, and even some performances before then, they were sluggish. They were getting the points, of course, but this has been coming for some time, Johnny, hasn't it? Something has to change.
Yeah, listen. Yes, but I would also say that it's more complex than that, and the malaise is deeper. We're all saying that Steven Gerrard's his tenure at the club was kind of petering out a little bit. We all agreed that. I think it's revisionist history to go back and say, like this is all sort of falling apart under Giovanni van Bronckhorst, and it was going well under Gerrard. It wasn't. That's the reality. The expected, if you start to get into expected points, underlying metrics, expected goals, Celtic have been outperforming Rangers since way before Giovanni van Bronckhorst arrived. This last few games has been very poor, but these players are capable of that. We've seen it. We've seen it before. We've seen it time and time again. I think what we've not seen before is a situation where they've just completely fallen apart over 2 games, 180 minutes defensively. That's 6 goals. And let's be honest, it wasn't for McGregor. Rangers could have been 5 or 6-0 down in that first half alone. That's how bad that first half was. That was the worst Old Firm performance I've seen in my 40 years watching the fixture. Well, I wasn't watching the fixture when I was a baby, but in 35 years of watching the fixture, I have never seen a first half performance like that. People were saying to me, well, what about the 6-2 game? Yeah, I think that was 3-1 or a half time or 3.
The Russell Martin semi-final is the worst for me. The one where Andy Halliday was taken off. That nothing beats that in terms of atrocious.
Yeah, that was bad. I was there at that game in the press box. Listen, that was bad, but I don't think that was a 5 or 6-0 half like this was. Like in terms of just absolute being a battering. And you had to look at the team that was out at that point. This is a much, much, much better team. So anyway, we could get into the specifics of whether or not it is the worst or isn't the worst. It's definitely one of them. Regardless, there's no one disputing that. For me, I think it's too early to be getting too concerned about Giovanni van Bronckhorst. I mean, as you say, Derek, when he came in, there was a definite new manager bounce, and we were all very, very pleased with the tweaks that he made, because all of a sudden Rangers were looking a lot less predictable. In terms of this individual game, I looked at it before the match and I liked the look of the setup, because I thought with Arfield and Aribo playing, it looked like Rangers were going to push on and press from the front and try and pin Celtic back, which is the way you get at them. Celtic's weakness is in their defence. You go after Starfeld, that's the weak player amongst their back four. Alongside, Greg Taylor was excellent last night, but you can get at him. This is not a guy who's unimpeachable. This is a guy you can get at. So if you go after Starfeld and Greg Taylor, you can definitely do something, but you need to actually get at them. Rangers created nothing in that first half apart from the opportunity for Aribo, and that was a gaping hole that he should have exploited more readily than he did. Second half, I understand why Giovanni van Bronckhorst said Rangers were significantly better, and certainly Ryan Jack came into the fray and it looked much more structured. It looked much more comfortable. Leon Balogun's a huge part of that. For me, Calvin Bassey has got a high ceiling at centre-back. Really, really quick, big, strong, powerful lad. Can't head the ball, needs to work on his positioning. Rangers is not a club where a development player at centre-back can play against Celtic and in Europe. That's the last that I want to see of that experiment in these type of games. For me, someone like Leon Balogun or Philip Helander has to play, and Bassey can go out to left-back, where, by the way, he's now first choice because that performance by Borna Barisic, I don't want to single out a player too much, but it genuinely was a beat the bed moment. It was devastatingly poor.
It was a Fernando Rickson 6-2 affair. That's what it was. He should have been hooked before halftime.
Exactly. 100% agree, Derek. He was just beyond awful for an international centre back. I say full back. We know the quality that he has. It was borderline disgraceful. That third goal, no wonder he was cowering after it and just holding his head in his hands, because he just completely. It was just schoolboy stuff. I mean, if that happened in a under-11s game, the left back would be getting a rollicking. For it to happen in a professional football match, just completely lose the winger like that was just embarrassing, frankly. And of course he's going to be dropped for the next game, and quite rightly too.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a sort of freedom of consciousness rant there, isn't it?
That's what it's all about, getting your points off your chest. A good question here from Stuart Lang here, Joshua. Sat too deep from the start. Is it time to drop Kent, as he is way off the pace right now? You mentioned a couple of pop shots that were meat and drink for Joe Hart. He looks devoid of confidence at the moment. He couldn't get past Juranovic at any point. He had one decent cross that fizzed across at the face of goal that Kemar Roof really should have done better with. Apart from that, Ryan Kent hasn't really, I'm not going to say turned up this season, but he's a shadow of the player that we know he is.
Yeah, he's been really poor. I think the interesting thing, and we were speaking about this off air, Derek, is that when Van Bronckhorst brought in kind of these changes, and Morelos playing closer to the goal, Kent playing wider, all these little traits, it was positive because the team needed it, and the team needed this variation, and they needed to do something different. But I think the issue last night is that performance and that setup was to kind of the other extreme, where you were sitting back, but there was no compactness. If Van Bronckhorst had plans to, I think, go and kind of soak up pressure and then try and attack Celtic when they tired, because we did see they did tire in the second half, then surely it would have been better to go with a different midfield. And even then, Celtics do these nice rotations where the fullback comes inside and the winger can get on the ball, but Rangers just played right into their hands because they tracked them in. If they'd sat and just stayed and protected the space, it would have been better as well. So I was really surprised at the way they set up. And I think Kent suffered from the fact that he was picking the ball up, in his own half and being tasked with countering beyond 3-4 players. There was no real moments apart from a couple in the second half where he did anything of note. But yeah, that's the issue for me. That seems to, last night was so far to the other extreme, and I think the challenge for Van Bronckhorst was to try and build on the foundations that were there, and add these little variations, retaining some of the good things. And Johnny's right, the end of the Gerrard era, Rangers had conceded the first goal in a row 8 times. Up until after the winter break, Rangers had only conceded 2 goals. So it's easy to forget that. But certainly last night, if the plan was to go and get in Celtic's face and press high, it certainly didn't seem like that instruction from the way that Rangers approached even the first minute. I even thought after the second half, and I know the second half was better, but it couldn't have got much worse. I just thought the way that Celtic pressed right from the first kickoff and Rangers didn't was quite emblematic of the intention of both teams.
If you're going to sit in and hit on the break, and you're going to keep Kent and Ahmad high up the pitch, why did you play that midfield 3? I mean, you've got Sands there, who's a central defensive midfield player. Okay, he's not covered himself in glory in the first couple of games that he's played, but he is at least able to sit, keep position, break up the play, track runners.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott Arfield can do that as well, but it's not his game. We know his game's box to box. Joe Aribo's game's attacking. Now, you're never going to drop Joe Aribo, but you could have played Joe Aribo on the right, for example, and asked him to drop back and help out the midfield. Because I thought Rangers were completely overloaded in there, because you had the Celtic midfield plus the 2 inverted fullbacks, which is exactly what this system of Ange Postecoglou is supposed to do. It gives you those extra players in there to dominate the ball in the midfield. But there had to be a solution to that. There had to be a strategy to that. And there is so many possibilities from an attacking point of view that gives you if you keep your midfielders high and wide. because the fullbacks are inside, so they space in the wide areas. But there was no strategy to get the ball to wide areas. And Kent is getting criticism, but I kind of think, to be honest, and Adam Thornton, one of the tactics writers on the website, he summed it up in a tweet where he said, "There's the midfield is where it's at. That's where the whole ball game is. And if the midfield's wrong, everything else is a consequence of that." And I thought the midfield was completely wrong. You couldn't really even tell if they were set up to have a one deep with two in front, or if there's no shape to it. There was no sense of structure, and Celtic swarmed them in such an intense way that there was just no obvious shape to the way Rangers were playing. They didn't look like they were aware this was going to happen, or that. And it's amazing that this was a shock, because it's what Celtic do. I mean, Ange Postecoglou, the one thing that he is eminently predictable, because not only does he do the same thing every week, he continually says over and over again that he's going to do the same thing when he's asked about it. You know, and if Scottish football history tells us anything, it's that pragmatists normally overcome ideologues. But in this case, an ideologue who everyone knows what he's going to do is overcoming a pragmatist, which is not good to see from a Rangers point of view.
That worries me, is from a coaching perspective, Joshua, that what Johnny just said there, something has to change, because going into Hearts, you're only as good as your last game. Hearts is not going to be an easy game at Ibrox on Sunday. That is going to be a difficult contest. And how does he pick the players up for this game?
But I think, as Ryan Jack said post-match, the players need to. I thought Ryan Jack's interview on Rangers TV was quite revealing, and he said what he needed to say. He's only been in the pitch for 45 minutes of the last 2 games, anyway. But he said the players need to dust themselves down, and etc. and used the cliches, but you could tell, I think he was speaking intentionally, and Rangers need to. There is. The point is one gap. The gap is 1 point, and that's attainable. But I think the psychological blow of last night and the kind of distance between the two teams in that first half is what Rangers need to work hard to make up. And although Van Bronckhorst came out and he said it looked as if his team were playing this first Old Firm, I think he used the word naive. As Johnny said, he played right into the hands of Postecoglou, and that was his fault. So Hearts needs to be a win, but I think it needs to be a really positive performance, because you need to get over this result as quickly as possible. Then it goes to Hibs, and then a few difficult games to follow. But Rangers just need points, but they need to get out the winter break slump, because what's that, 7 points dropped, I think, now since they came back in January.
Yeah. I don't know what's happened in the winter break, but they've not come back the same side. Left gets in touch. We used to play the high press. Why don't we do it now? Johnny, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was quizzed in this prior to the Celtic game.
That's a very good question.
Yeah. He was quizzed in this prior to the Celtic game with regards to the drop points at Dingwall, and he responded saying that's not how they play. It was game management at the time. It's clear. I mean, Pittodrie, Dingwall and Parkhead, it's clear Rangers were looking to contain. It looks like this is going to take time to deprogram the players from what they're used to under Gerrard to what Giovanni Van Bronckhorst is looking to play. Yeah,
honestly, I just feel like there needs to be a note of caution here. I'm like Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, and I thought this whole thing about sitting back, I didn't see that against Ross County, really. Maybe in the first half after the first goal, but I think he's right. I don't think it was an instruction, and I think it was more about just how the players manage the game on an individual basis at Ross County. I've disagreed with that narrative for a few days now. I thought Rangers were pretty good at Ross County and lost 3 incredibly stupid goals. Last night's completely different. Last night is about the players not looking like they were up for the fight, in my view. And I know I sound like an old Rangers dad when I say that, but genuinely, sometimes in football, the basics have to be right, and the basics were not right in that game. Listen, on the high press thing, on the 37th minute, Rangers pressed as a team, and they pressed hard and they pressed high, and Celtic put the ball out for a throw-in about 30 yards from goal on their left-hand side. Why wasn't that tactic adopted? I don't know. I think that's the way to get at Celtic, is to be aggressive. Okay, it opens up the game and you might end up with a 4-4 job or a ridiculous score line, because obviously they're very good at breaking.
But Rangers Rangers get very good players. I know people say, "Oh, you're going to a tough place," but Rangers have been to tough places before, and they have quality in there. Like Ahmad, they've got players like Ahmad, Kima Arif.
Ahmad looked like a little boy lost last night, though.
Yeah.
He looked like he was thinking, "What have I let myself in for?" I mean, he just didn't look like he had the appetite for the hurly burly of the game. And listen, he's only a kid. So you go into that, and it was probably a shock to system. I mean, Man United will be absolutely delighted because that's the kind of experience that will be great for his career. But it wasn't great for Rangers having him on, because £37 million. And I know, listen, it's a bit lazy of me to be using that and throwing that around. It's not fair, but it's hard. It's hard not to, isn't it? Because accompanied with a transfer fee of that size and playing for a club like Manchester United, you expect more. It has to be put into context of his age, but to say that he didn't produce was an understatement on the night, and he just looked scared. Frankly, he just looked like it was a bear pit too far for him. In terms of the atmosphere and the sheer pace that Celtic played at. I mean, it wasn't impressive to watch from a Rangers point of view, but I think a neutral would look at it and say that the intensity that Celtic played with, for whenever the ball went out of play, Derek, Joshua, you'll have noticed this as well, it was back in play with a short pass within seconds. I mean, there wasn't room to breathe in terms of, right, here comes Celtic, they're taking 12 seconds to take the corner kick, everyone take a breather, everyone get organised. It was the ball rolled out for a corner, someone was sprinting over to get the ball down quickly, and straight out back into play before Rangers had sort of resettled. And it was like that on every set piece, whether it be a free kick, whether it be a corner, whether it be a throw-in. The pace was relentless. And Rangers just didn't look like they were ready for that. They looked like they were caught in, like I think somebody said, deer in the headlights. That's exactly what they looked like in that first half. And let's be honest, let's be absolutely honest, cards on the table. What did we think was going to happen at half-time? So, I mean, that Giovanni Van Bronckhorst does deserve credit, because I thought we were looking down the barrel of a 6-0.
Yeah.
So, second half, there was a massive improvement. And actually, Rangers were probably the better team in the second half, marginally. But it's too late at that point, obviously.
Yeah, the game's done. Yeah, the game's over. Okay, folks, I think that'll do us there. Thanks to everyone for getting in touch. Another busy show as ever. Really appreciate the interaction. If you haven't done so already, if you're watching this on YouTube, head over and hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a video when we go live. And you've only got one day left, a couple of days, because it is Thursday, to take advantage of that great offer we've got on the Rangers Review site. Just £1 for an entire 6-month period to support top quality journalism covering the club you love. You also get entered into a prize draw for a signed Rangers first team jersey. Just head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe. Okay, we'll be back tomorrow morning to look ahead to the match on Sunday. But until then, enjoy the rest of your Thursday.